The night screamed. Not in the way a storm usually does, not the harmless howl of wind through trees, but a cry that felt alive. It clawed at the sky like something desperate to escape its own body. Rain fell in hard, angry sheets, turning the ground into mud thick enough to swallow footsteps whole. Lightning split the clouds open, spilling white fire over the mountains. And through that chaos, she ran. A woman, barely more than a shadow against the fury of the night. Her cloak was torn, her boots soaked, her hair plastered to her face. She couldn't see the world around her, not because it was dark, but because she was blind. Yet she moved like she could feel everything. Every drop of rain, every heartbeat of the earth, every branch reaching out to scratch her skin. Her pulse was wild, but her mind sharper than any blade behind her. They were close. The sound of hounds tore through the storm. Not wolves, no, she would have trusted wolves. These were beasts bred to hunt her kind, their growls heavy with silver-scented rage. And behind them, she could hear her mother's soldiers, the ones who wore the mark of the silver matron. The same crest that once decorated her childhood bed. The same crest that now hunted her like she was a prize to be reclaimed. Her lungs burned as she stumbled over a root, catching herself against the rough bark of an old pine. She whispered a curse under her breath, not loud enough for the gods to hear, just enough to keep herself grounded. She couldn't afford to shift. Not tonight. Not after what happened the last time. Her inner wolf stirred anyway. It always did when she was afraid. That low voice in her bones, that haunting urge whispering, "Run faster. Fight back. Let me out." But she clenched her jaw, ignoring the electric heat crawling under her skin. She couldn't lose control. Not again. Thunder rolled so violently it felt like the sky was breaking apart. For a moment, she thought she could hear chains clinking between each rumble, faint echoes from a life she'd buried long ago. And then, without warning, the past hit her like a punch to the chest. The auction square. The iron stage. The sound of hundreds of wolves watching as her mother offered her to the highest bidder. A blind omega. A cursed bloodline. A child touched by flame. The memory burned sharper than lightning. She could still smell the smoke that had followed her escape that day. The scent of her own power tearing through the market when fear pushed her too far. She hadn't meant to. The fire had just come. And when it didn't stop until everything, the chains, the banners, the screams, was gone. Since that night, she'd promised herself never to shift again. Never to feel that power. Never to let the world see what she really was. Her body trembled as another growl echoed from the forest behind her. The hounds were closer now. She could almost taste their metallic breath through the rain. She turned sharply, her hands brushing against cold bark, trying to orient herself. The forest felt endless, every tree identical, every path leading nowhere. But she kept running. The storm whipped her hair into her face, stinging her skin like needles. Her breath came out in ragged bursts, white fog curling from her lips. Her fingers brushed against thorns, catching blood, but she didn't stop. The forest floor was a blur of roots and ice, and she stumbled more than once, her knees bruising, her palms raw. Still, she pushed forward. Because behind her was the world she had fled, and ahead, even if it was only emptiness, was freedom. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought it might give her away. Every crack of a branch made her flinch. Every echo of thunder felt like a voice calling her name, Lyria. Her mother's voice. Cold, commanding, the sound of a woman who loved power more than blood. "Come home, my daughter," it used to say. "Come take your place." But Lyria had learned the hard way that some homes are just cages built from love that hurts too much to bear. She reached a clearing, breath heaving. For a moment, she thought she'd lost them. The night was quiet except for the rain dripping from leaves. The forest felt like it was holding its breath. And in that silence, she let herself collapse to her knees, her fingers digging into the mud. She wanted to cry. But the tears wouldn't come. Instead, she whispered, barely a sound, barely a prayer. I'll never be claimed again. The wind seemed to pause, and then shifted. It moved differently now. Heavy. Alive. Like it had hurt her. And somewhere within that storm, something else moved too. It wasn't a hound. It wasn't human either. It was slower, steadier, deliberate. Lyria's head snapped up. Her pulse stuttered. The air carried a scent that made her chest tighten, smoke, pine, and something dark beneath it. Not danger exactly, but recognition. She didn't know how she could know that smell, but every instinct in her body went still. Her inner wolf went quiet for the first time all night. The forest whispered in warning. The rain slowed to a hush. Then, a growl. Not from the hounds, not from behind her. In front of her. Low. Deep. Ancient. It vibrated through the ground, through her bones, through the parts of her she didn't want to wake. She froze, her hand reaching out instinctively, fingertips brushing air thick with energy. The storm seemed to hold its breath as lightning flashed, and in that brief light, she saw it. A figure. Broad shoulders, cloak soaked in rain, eyes glowing faint gold from the shadows. He stood still, but his presence was thunder. Lyria couldn't see his face clearly, but she didn't need to. Every cell in her body recognized him before her mind did. The Alpha King. The one whose name was spoken in the same breath as danger and destiny. The one her mother feared more than death. And he was looking right at her. For a second, time stopped. The storm faded into silence. The only thing that existed was the steady rhythm of two heartbeats, his and hers, pounding in sync. She didn't move. Neither did he. Then he spoke, his voice calm, deep, carrying through the rain. Running won't hide you from what's already inside you. The words hit harder than the storm. Her lips parted, but no sound came. How could he know? How could he see her, truly see her, when she had spent her whole life unseen? The hounds barked again, breaking the spell. She stumbled backward, panic flaring in her chest. The Alpha King took one slow step forward. The air between them sparked, literal electricity, her silver flame reacting to his dark aura. He said her name. Softly. Like a confession. Lyria. The way he spoke it, it wasn't a warning. It wasn't even a command. It was recognition. Like he'd been searching for her all his life. She shook her head, heart racing, tears mixing with the rain. Don't come closer. But he didn't stop. He moved through the mud, his presence filling the clearing like a force of nature. The closer he got, the more her power stirred beneath her skin. The same dangerous energy she'd buried years ago now hummed like wildfire through her veins. And then, the hounds broke through the trees. Silver eyes. Sharp teeth. Dozens of them. Lyria gasped, stepping back instinctively, but before she could even think, the Alpha King's hand lifted. The growl that followed shook the air itself. One command, unspoken. And the hounds froze. They whimpered. Tails tucked. The storm seemed to bow around him. Lyria's breath caught. She felt it in her chest, the raw dominance, the authority that came not from cruelty, but from pain. The kind of power that was earned through loss. Lightning flashed again, revealing his face for a heartbeat, strong, scarred, eyes burning like molten gold. And in that fleeting light, she saw something she didn't expect. Not hunger. Not pity. But recognition. Like he had been haunted by the same nightmares. Her lips trembled. Why are you here? He didn't answer right away. He just watched her, studied her, like every second mattered. Then finally, his voice dropped lower, rougher. Because you were never meant to run from who you are. Her knees nearly gave out. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him he didn't understand, that she'd already lost everything once. But before she could speak, the thunder crashed again, and the storm swallowed their words. In that chaos, she knew one thing with bone-deep certainty. Whatever he was, whatever he wanted, her life was about to change. And as the Alpha King stepped closer, the forest itself seemed to bend around him, whispering a single truth she had tried so hard to forget. She wasn't the hunted anymore. She was the spark the darkness had been waiting for. The storm raged on. And somewhere in the distance, the gods held their breath. Before the storm quiets, the voice fades, soft but urgent, join Sophie's romance collections, where every heartbeat tells a story worth bleeding for. Subscribe now, because love like this burns even in the dark. The storm didn't end, it only changed its shape. Rain softened into mist, but the air thickened, heavy enough to taste. Each drop of water clung to her skin like a secret trying to hold on. The forest had gone quiet, unnaturally quiet, as though every living thing was waiting for what came next. Lyria stood frozen. Every sense sharpened to the edge of pain. The scent reached her first: smoke, cedar, iron. It filled her lungs before she even realized she was breathing it in. The kind of scent that could make the world stop spinning. It was both danger and safety, both ruin and shelter. Then she heard him. A single shift in the air. A low step through the mud. No rush. No hesitation. Just certainty. Her hands trembled, but she forced them still. The blindness made her world smaller, sharper. She could sense the size of him before she saw anything, his presence pressed against her like gravity, pulling everything in. Broad shoulders. Steady breath. Power that didn't need to be announced. And then, from somewhere in that mist, a voice. Calm. Deep. Rough like stone worn smooth by time. The blind Omega, he said. Hiding from her mother's curse. Her heart clenched. The words were knives wrapped in silk. How did he know? She flinched back, her instincts colliding with her fear. Her claws began to form, half-shifted, trembling, the wolf inside her clawing to the surface. But she bit it back, swallowing the transformation before it could take her. Don't, she hissed. Her voice shook. Don't come closer. But he did. One step. Then another. Not to threaten, just to exist. The world seemed to move with him. The scent of cedar deepened. The space between them felt charged, almost electric. Lyria's breath hitched, she could feel her pulse in her throat, in her fingertips, everywhere. The storm had faded, but she still felt like she was standing in the middle of lightning. His tone softened, carrying something she hadn't heard in a long time: sorrow. I've known you longer than you think, he said. Long before this forest. Long before the chains. The sound of that word, chains, ripped through her like memory. The market square. The jeers. The smell of burning iron. She wanted to run. But her legs wouldn't move. You watched me? Her voice was small, breaking on the last word. Yes. His answer came without hesitation. I saw you in the market of Lyrian, when they tied you to the post and called you cursed. He stepped closer, the mud whispering beneath his boots. They saw a weapon. I saw silence that didn't bow. Lyria's throat tightened. No one had ever said that before. The world had always seen her as a tragedy or a threat, never as something sacred. But before she could speak, the forest shifted again. From the edges of the mist came a low snarl. A blur of movement. One of the hunting wolves, larger than any mortal beast, broke through the trees. Its eyes burned silver, its teeth dripping with venomous froth. Lyria's heart seized. Her body reacted before her mind did, hands glowing faintly, the first flickers of silver fire licking across her fingertips. But before she could release it, before she could lose control, the Alpha King moved. He didn't shout. He didn't warn. He just roared. The sound tore through the air like thunder made flesh. It was ancient, commanding, primal, the kind of sound the world itself remembered to fear. The wolf stopped mid-lunge. It whimpered, body trembling, and then, like smoke, it retreated into the shadows. The silence that followed wasn't relief. It was reverence. Lyria's breath came fast, sharp. Her body still hummed from the echo of his roar. She had never felt something like that, not power that wanted to dominate, but power that protected. He turned to her slowly, the mist swirling around him. His eyes caught what little light the storm left behind, gold, fierce, and unbearably sad. "Why," she began, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Why help me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he knelt, pressing his hand into the muddy ground between them, grounding both of them in the moment. "Because you don't belong in chains," he said quietly. "And neither do I." Something in his tone made her chest ache. She wanted to look away, but there was nowhere to look. Even blind, she could feel his gaze. Her fingers twitched, still trembling with the memory of fire. "You shouldn't have come. You don't know what I am." His lips curved into something like a grim smile. "I do." He paused, and the air shifted again, heavy with truth. "I've felt your fire in my dreams." Her stomach dropped. She wanted to deny it, but her wolf stirred inside, restless, alert. "I don't dream," she said, the words catching in her throat. "Not anymore." "Then maybe this isn't a dream," he murmured. She hated the way her body reacted, how every nerve seemed to wake up under his voice. She hated the heat rising in her cheeks, the trembling in her hands, the way the air between them buzzed like a storm waiting to strike. "Who are you?" she asked. He tilted his head slightly, like he was listening to something only he could hear. "Someone who's been watching the same world burn as you." His voice softened, a confession buried inside it. "I saw the fire that night in Lyrian. The night you freed yourself. You burned the chains. You burned the Empire's lies. And I knew then, the gods weren't done with you." Lyria shook her head, stepping back until her shoulder brushed the cold bark of a tree. "That wasn't freedom," she whispered. "It was fear." "I didn't mean to." He interrupted gently. "You survived. That's enough." The rain began again. Soft, like the world was catching its breath. Lyria wrapped her arms around herself. Her cloak clung to her, soaked and heavy, but she didn't care. "You shouldn't have followed me," she said, her voice trembling between defiance and exhaustion. "My mother's men will come for you too." He smiled faintly, a flash of warmth that didn't reach his eyes. "Let them." There was something about the way he said it, so calm, so certain, that made her believe him. And that terrified her even more. She tried to take another step back, but he moved closer, slow enough for her to stop him if she wanted to. She didn't. He reached out, not to touch her, but close enough that she could feel the heat of his hand through the rain. "You've been running for so long you don't remember what it's like to rest." Her breath caught. His voice had shifted again, lower, almost gentle. It wasn't command anymore. It was something softer. Something that made her want to trust him even though she knew she shouldn't. "Rest is dangerous," she said quietly. "That's when they find you." He studied her for a long moment. Then, with a quiet sigh, he said, "Maybe you've been found for a reason." The words hit harder than they should have. She turned her face away, as though the mist could hide her expression. "You don't know what my mother will do if she learns you're here. She'll kill you." His reply was simple, steady. "She's been trying for years." For the first time, she looked toward him, unseeing eyes wide. "You've faced her?" "I've faced worse," he said. "But I've never met anyone who made her afraid. Until now." Her breath stilled. Fear and curiosity wrestled in her chest. He stepped closer again, and this time, she didn't move away. The air between them felt different now, not just charged, but alive. The storm had softened into a slow, steady rain that whispered against the leaves. She could hear his heartbeat. Slow. Strong. Like a rhythm that could steady the chaos in her chest. "Why are you here?" she asked finally. "What do you want from me?" He hesitated, just for a moment. Then he said, to make sure you don't disappear again. The words landed heavy, intimate. Too intimate. Her throat tightened. She wanted to say something sharp, to build walls again, but the sincerity in his tone disarmed her. You don't even know me, she whispered. I know your silence, he said. I know what it looks like when someone carries a fire they're too afraid to touch. The rain thickened, washing mud from the roots around them. Lyria's chest rose and fell in uneven rhythm. The urge to run warred with the instinct to stay. He turned his gaze toward the forest behind her, scanning for movement, but his attention kept coming back to her, as if protecting her was no longer a choice but a reflex. Somewhere far off, the faint echo of a horn cut through the night. Her mother's hunters. Lyria stiffened, every muscle in her body going taut. They're close. He nodded once. Then we move. I can't. You can, he interrupted. His tone wasn't cruel, but it left no room for argument. You've outrun death before. You can do it again. I don't even know where to go, she said, the panic breaking through now. The forest doesn't end. I've been running for hours. Then follow me. She hesitated. Every part of her screamed not to trust him. But the wolves were coming, and the sound of their howls split through the rain, shaking the ground beneath them. Her choice wasn't really a choice. He offered his hand, not in dominance, but in promise. You don't have to see to find your way, he said softly. Just hold on. For a heartbeat, she stood there, frozen between fear and faith. Then she reached out. The moment her fingers touched his, something shifted. The forest seemed to breathe again. The storm slowed. The fire in her veins flickered, answering something deep in him. The connection was instant, terrifying and familiar. It wasn't magic. It was recognition. The Alpha King's fingers tightened around hers, grounding her as thunder rolled far away. You feel it too, he said quietly. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat was too tight, her chest too full. He led her forward through the mist, moving with the kind of certainty that made the world trust him. Every step they took together felt like stepping into a story neither of them had asked to be part of, but one the universe refused to stop writing. Behind them, the hounds howled again, desperate, furious. Lyria turned her head slightly, listening, then whispered, almost to herself, they won't stop. They don't have to, he replied. They'll never catch us. And for the first time that night, she almost believed it. The mist swallowed them both, the storm fading into quiet. But under that silence, something far greater had awakened, something that neither of them yet understood. And as they disappeared deeper into the forest, the world itself seemed to tremble, whispering the truth neither dared to say aloud. This was no rescue. It was the beginning of a bond that would rewrite the fate of wolves and gods alike. The cabin smelled of cedar smoke and rain. The fire cracked low, weaving light and shadow across the rough wooden walls, the same way memory and regret crossed her heart. She sat near the hearth, legs folded, cloak still damp, her pale fingers tracing the grooves in the old table as though they might tell her what the world had taken from her. Outside, the storm sighed through the trees, not the kind that roared, but the kind that whispered of ghosts. He stood near the door, tall, silent, the weight of his presence filling every inch of that cabin. His golden eyes caught the flicker of flame, glinting like a predator's restraint. She could feel his gaze even though her own eyes saw nothing. She didn't need sight to know the way his energy thrummed, calm on the surface, chaos underneath. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost reverent. How does a royal Omega vanish into the woods and become a ghost no one dares name? The question cracked through her chest like the snap of dry wood. She wanted to laugh. Or scream. But her throat only produced a quiet hum, a sound caught between exhaustion and defiance. I didn't vanish, she said softly. I burned the world that tried to own me. The words came without tremor, yet behind them lay years of blood and smoke. The scent of iron, the sound of chains tightening around her wrists, and the echo of her mother's voice, cold as steel. She could still see the Roman city of Lyrian when she closed her eyes, the marble steps slick with rain, the torches swaying in the wind as the empire's elites gathered to witness the auction. She remembered the roar of the crowd, the glint of silver coins, and her mother's proud, unflinching face at the top of the steps. "The high matron of the silver pack," she whispered, voice brittle as frost. "My mother. She sold me to them, to the Alpha Senate. Said I was too dangerous to love, too wild to rule." He didn't interrupt. He simply moved closer, the floor creaking beneath his weight. "I was born with a silver flame in my blood," she continued. "They said it could blind gods. They weren't wrong. When I was a child, light would spill from my skin when I was frightened. It frightened her, frightened everyone. They called it a curse." Her lips twisted into a sad, humorless smile. "Cursed to be too bright in a world that worships shadows." The Alpha's jaw tightened. She could sense it in the air, in the subtle shift of his heartbeat. He understood that kind of exile, not the kind written by others, but the one you write into yourself when pain becomes home. He finally spoke. "And when the auction began?" Her breath hitched. "The fire popped, sending a shower of embers into the air. They dressed me in chains of silver. They made me stand on the platform while the Alpha Lords of the Empire bid for me, for my bloodline, for the power they could breathe through me." She lifted her head slightly, her sightless eyes aimed toward the sound of his breathing. "I remember the sound of the hammer striking. I remember my mother's perfume, lavender and ash. I remember realizing she'd rather see me caged than crowned." Silence pressed down on the room like a held breath. Then, with a voice that trembled like the edge of a blade, she said, "When they brought the blade to my palm to take the first cut of blood, I changed. I didn't want to. I didn't even know I could. But it was like something ancient woke up inside me. Silver fire spilled from my skin, it devoured everything. The hall, the chains, the guards. Even my mother's name burned that night." Her voice cracked on the last word. The firelight danced over her face, beauty shadowed by ruin. He said nothing. But his silence wasn't cold. It was full, filled with something unspoken. Understanding. Recognition. "I ran for 3 days through the forests," she said after a long pause. "Didn't stop until I reached these mountains. Built this place with my own hands. Swore I'd never shift again. Never feel that kind of power again. It doesn't free me, it consumes." Her words fell heavy, and for a moment, she thought he'd leave. But instead, he came closer, his step slow, deliberate. She felt the air change as he knelt beside her, his presence brushing against her like the first warmth after endless winter. "I've seen power destroy," he said. "I've watched it hollow men out until all that was left were crowns with no hearts beneath them." There was something raw in his voice. She tilted her head, listening. "You've lost, haven't you?" He didn't deny it. "A brother. A kingdom. And perhaps myself." Her fingers trembled slightly. "And yet, you came for me." He let out a breath, not laughter, not sorrow, but something in between. "Maybe I was looking for something I'd already lost." For the first time, she turned fully toward him. Her blank eyes reflected the fire's glow. "Or someone." The air tightened. Outside, the storm rolled lower in the valley, its growl softer now, as though the world itself leaned in to listen. He reached for her hand. She didn't flinch this time. His skin was warm, calloused, steady, a strange comfort in a life that had only known blades and betrayal. When their fingers met, her pulse stuttered. The silver inside her stirred, faint but real, like the first note of a forgotten song. The fire flickered brighter, shadows twisting across the walls like restless spirits. She could feel her wolf stir beneath her skin, pacing, watching, waiting. "Why didn't you fear me?" she asked quietly. He looked at her, and though she couldn't see it, she felt the weight of his gaze in every inch of her being. "Because I saw you before the fire," he said. "In the market. When they chained you. You stood there, broken but unbent. I thought, that's not a curse. That's a queen refusing to kneel. Her breath caught. The cabin seemed to shrink, the air too thick with memory and something deeper, something that hummed just beneath the skin. I am no queen, she murmured. Maybe not, he said softly. But you are what queens fear. Her throat tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever seen her as more than her curse. Outside, the wolves began to howl, long, mournful cries echoing through the storm. The sound pulled at her bones, at the part of her she'd tried to bury. They call for you, he said. They call for blood, she answered. He shook his head. No. They call for balance. The world remembers the silver flame, even if you wish to forget it. Her pulse thrummed faster. The firelight painted her skin in golden shadow, and for a heartbeat, she imagined she could see herself reflected in his eyes, not the cursed Omega, not the runaway, but something in between. Something waiting to be reborn. He released her hand slowly, as though reluctant to break the connection. The space between them filled with words neither of them were ready to say. She turned back to the fire, whispering, "You shouldn't have come here." "Maybe," he replied, voice low and steady, "but I think I was always meant to." She didn't answer. Couldn't. Because somewhere deep in her chest, under the ashes of fear and fury, a spark flickered to life, the same silver flame she'd sworn never to awaken again. And outside, beyond the cabin walls, the wind carried a scent that made her blood run cold. The scent of her mother's mark. The Alpha's head lifted sharply. His eyes burned brighter, golden light cutting through the dim cabin. She felt it too, that creeping awareness, that old terror. The past was not done with her. Not yet. And in that instant, the warmth between them turned into something sharper. A vow. Whatever hunted her through the mountains would soon learn, she was done running. The silver flame stirred within her veins, whispering promises of fire and vengeance, and beside her, the Alpha's shadow stretched long across the floor, two broken souls standing on the edge of destiny, bound by secrets neither of them could outrun. The mountain path wound upward like a scar carved through the world. The air grew colder with every step, thin and sharp, scraping against their lungs. Frost clung to the edges of the pine trees, whispering secrets as the wind passed through their branches. She followed the Alpha's footsteps by sound, each crunch of his boots a guide through the thick snow. Behind her, the forest stretched in silence. Ahead, the cliffs waited, ancient and brooding. "The temple is real," he said quietly, his breath misting in the air. "My father used to speak of it. A place where the first wolves made their vow to the moon." She tilted her head slightly, her blind gaze lifting toward the sound of his voice. "And why bring me there?" "Because the air changes when you walk," he said. "Because when you breathe, the wind listens." Her chest tightened. "You think I'm some myth?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence between them carried more truth than words ever could. When they reached the cliffs, the world opened before them, jagged stone rising from the fog like the ribs of a god. Carved into the mountain face stood the remains of a Roman temple, pillars cracked, vines crawling up their sides, the weight of centuries pressing down on every stone. She stepped forward slowly, her fingers brushing the cold surface of the wall. The stone hummed beneath her touch. "I know this place," she whispered. "But I've never been here." He looked at her, the gold in his eyes dimming to something deeper, mixed with unease. "Maybe you've been called here." Inside, the air was still. Dust floated in beams of fading light. Faded murals stretched across the walls, their colors muted by time, wolves drawn in silver pigment, men kneeling before them, and in the center, a figure cloaked in light, blindfolded, her hands raised toward the moon. He stopped in front of one mural and reached out. His fingers traced the outline of a mark carved into the stone, a spiral surrounded by flames. "This," he said softly, "is on your hand." She turned her palm upward. The scar glowed faintly, as though remembering its origin. The sightless eyes of the painted Omega seemed to turn toward her. The temple shuddered. At first, it was faint, a low vibration that traveled through the ground, up their spines. Then came the whisper. Not from outside. From everywhere. Voices, hundreds of them, overlapping, chanting in a tongue neither living nor dead. Her name wove through them, carried by the air like a song she'd once known and forgotten. Her breath quickened. Do you hear that? He nodded, his hand moving to the hilt of his blade though he knew steel couldn't cut through ghosts. The whispers grew louder. The torches along the walls flickered to life one by one, silver fire bursting from their tips. Shadows danced wildly, stretching across the murals as if the wolves painted on the stone had come alive. She stumbled backward, clutching her head. Images flooded her mind, visions so vivid they felt carved into her bones. She saw a city burning beneath two moons. She saw wolves made of stars leaping across the sky, their howls shaking the heavens. She saw an alpha king, tall, proud, and trembling, kneeling before a blind woman whose hands burned like suns. The vision shifted. The woman's face changed, and it was hers. She gasped, the sound breaking from her throat like a cry torn between terror and recognition. No, she whispered. No, I'm not her. The alpha stepped toward her. What did you see? She turned her face away, shaking her head. A lie. A curse made into legend. He reached out, his hand hovering near her shoulder but not quite touching. Tell me. Her voice cracked as she spoke. They called her the Child of Flame. Said her voice could command the moon, her power could end kings. They said she would be born blind, untouched by sight but marked by truth. He stared at her, realization dawning like lightning across his face. And you think that's you? I know it isn't, she snapped. I'm not a savior. I'm a mistake. A daughter my mother tried to sell to clean her own sins. The torches roared, silver light flooding the chamber. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with energy, each heartbeat echoing hers. Then why, he asked, his voice steady, does the temple respond to you? She froze. The firelight reflected off her pale skin, making her look half ethereal, half undone. The sound of chanting rose higher, the ancient language weaving around her like a crown she refused to wear. She lifted her hand, trying to silence it, but the air only grew heavier. The silver flame inside her veins stirred again, this time without her permission. Her body trembled as heat surged through her. The mark on her palm blazed white-hot. Stop, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please stop. But the temple did not obey. The symbols on the walls began to glow, spirals, moons, and wolves circling her in light. The fire flared higher, its hue turning from silver to pure white. The alpha stumbled back, shielding his eyes. What are you doing? I'm not doing anything, she cried. Her blind eyes opened wide, and though they saw nothing, light poured from them like tears. The air around her shimmered, bending, alive. The spirit's whispers changed, no longer chaotic, now unified, worshipful. They chanted her name with reverence. Stop calling me that, she screamed, her voice echoing off the stone. I'm not your chosen one. The moment her defiance struck the air, the flames around the temple exploded outward. The sound was deafening. Then silence. The light dimmed. Smoke curled through the air. She dropped to her knees, chest heaving, her palms burned but still glowing faintly. The alpha approached carefully, his boots scraping over broken stone. He knelt before her. You can deny it, he said quietly. But it doesn't change what's inside you. She lifted her head, her expression raw, anger and grief braided together. You think destiny means anything to someone who's been used by it her whole life? He met her gaze, his eyes like molten gold in the dim light. Maybe destiny isn't something that uses you. Maybe it's something waiting for you to claim it. Her breath caught. His words felt like a blade cutting through the fog of her guilt. She wanted to believe him, gods, she wanted to. But belief was dangerous. It always came with a cost. She stood slowly, unsteady but proud, her cloak dragging through the ash that now covered the floor. The temple groaned softly, as if acknowledging her resistance. When she spoke again, her tone was softer, almost resigned. "If I am the child they speak of, then why was I born to be sold?" He rose beside her. "Because light always draws darkness. And your mother, she feared the shadow more than the flame." Her lips trembled, not from fear but from something deeper, sorrow-shaped like understanding. The Alpha reached for her hand once more, his touch grounding. "The world is stirring again. The Pax feel it. The Senate feels it. Whatever you are, whatever they made you, the choice will come soon, to run or to rise." Her hand tightened in his. "And if I choose wrong? Then we burn together." The words lingered between them, heavy and intimate. Outside, the wind began to shift. It no longer carried the scent of snow but something older, ozone and blood and prophecy. The temple walls vibrated again, softer this time, like a heartbeat fading into the distance. She exhaled slowly, the tension leaving her shoulders for the first time in years. "I'm so tired of being what they want me to be." "Then don't be," he said simply. "Be what the fire chose instead." She turned her head toward him, her blind eyes glinting with the faint echo of silver light. "You speak like someone who's seen too much." "I have," he murmured. "Enough to know that power without purpose destroys. And you were never meant to destroy." The silence that followed was tender, almost sacred. They stood together in the fading glow of the temple, two broken legacies, one marked by fire, the other by crown, both haunted by what the world expected of them. As they turned to leave, the mural behind them changed. The blind Omega's painted face cracked open, and beneath it, another figure appeared. A wolf crowned in gold, eyes bright as the sun. The Alpha King of legend. Neither of them saw it. But the temple did. And in that sacred silence, where centuries met the breath of the living, the prophecy whispered again, "When flame meets crown, the world shall kneel." The mountains burned that night. Not with mortal fire, but with the light of something divine and terrible, the silver flame she had sworn would never awaken again. The battle's echo lingered in the air, smoke curling through the trees, the metallic scent of blood hanging heavy. The Alpha King's warriors had scattered, torn between loyalty and fear. The ground steamed where her power had struck, grass turned to ash, stone cracked open like bone. She stood amidst the ruin, trembling, eyes clouded with tears she couldn't see but could feel cutting through her skin. Her heart pounded like a drum of war. She could still hear the dying groans of soldiers, the frantic retreat of wolves whose courage had dissolved in silver light. And beneath it all, the shallow, breaking breaths of him. She turned toward the sound. The Alpha lay upon the fractured ground, his body scorched where he'd shielded her from the first onslaught. Even in pain, he radiated authority, a wounded storm refusing to yield. She knelt beside him, her shaking hands tracing the edges of his wound. The scent of his blood, wild, dark, alive, called to something deep within her. Her gift pulsed beneath her skin, begging to be used, to heal him. But she remembered the temple's walls burning, the screams of those who touched her light and turned to dust. "I can't," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'll destroy you." His eyes, gold even in shadow, opened slowly. "Then destroy me," he rasped. "But don't let me die without seeing what you really are." The plea cracked her resolve. Her hand pressed to his chest, trembling. The silver fire moved, soft as breath, sliding from her veins into his. His body convulsed, his skin glowing as if stars were being stitched beneath it. Pain flashed across his face, then stillness. Then breath. The flame dimmed, receding back into her palm, leaving only a faint shimmer in his veins. He opened his eyes. The gold was brighter now, touched with silver, like moonlight drowned in sunfire. "What have you done to me?" he whispered, voice low, reverent. She stumbled back, clutching her arm. "I don't know," she murmured. "Maybe I've cursed you too." He rose slowly, each movement deliberate, controlled, but his gaze never left her. The bond between them pulsed, alive, stronger now, deeper than scent or blood. It was the language of souls recognizing themselves in another. He reached for her hand. "You didn't curse me," he said. "You bound us." The words pierced through her defenses. She tore her hand away, fear and longing colliding in her chest. "You don't understand. The flame doesn't heal, it claims. Once it touches you, it owns you." He stepped closer, unafraid. "Then let it own me." Thunder rolled across the peaks, the sound of armies regrouping. The Roman legions had not retreated entirely, they had withdrawn to summon greater force. Torches glimmered below, scattered like fireflies across the valley. Her heart twisted. "They'll return with silver chains." "Let them," he growled. "Let them see who they tried to break." But she was already moving, away from him, away from the burning fields. Her instinct screamed to run, to vanish again into the wilderness that had kept her alive all these years. The world would always hunt what it feared. And she, cursed with the flame, was its oldest fear reborn. He called after her, voice echoing through the smoke. "You think you're running from them, but you're running from yourself." She didn't turn back. By dawn, the mountains were silent again. She found herself at the river's edge, the one that ran like a silver vein through the valley. Her reflection flickered on its surface, half shadow, half light. For the first time in years, she saw not the blind Omega, not the runaway, but something else, something ancient, watching her from within her own form. Behind her, the forest shifted, footsteps. His scent reached her before his voice. Cedar. Smoke. Rain. "You left me bleeding," he said, not with anger, but with quiet gravity. She closed her eyes. "I saved you." He stepped closer. "And abandoned yourself." Her lips parted to protest, but no words came. He moved until his presence enveloped her, warmth, strength, gravity. "You think the flame is a curse," he said softly, "because your mother told you so. But I've seen what it does. It doesn't destroy. It reveals." She shook her head. "You saw the bodies burn. I saw the chains melt." The silence that followed was heavy, charged, almost unbearable. She could feel his heartbeat through the air, steady and deliberate, syncing with her own. "You don't understand what's coming," she said at last. The prophecy wasn't just a story carved in stone. It was a warning. When the flame rises, the alpha falls. You were never meant to stand beside me. You were meant to die because of me. He reached out, his hand resting against her cheek. "Then I'll die knowing I was chosen to stand where no other dared." Her breath hitched, a fragile sound, raw with everything she'd buried. But then the air shifted. The forest grew colder, sharper. A new scent rolled through the trees, steel, smoke, fear. They turned at once. From the ridge above, the banners of the Roman legions rippled, thousands of them. A sea of soldiers in silver armor, their spears glowing with runes. The praetor stood at their head, his voice carrying across the valley like a blade. "Surrender the cursed Omega, or burn with her." The alpha's growl rumbled deep, low. "They've made their choice." She looked at him, panic and devotion warring in her heart. "You can't fight them all." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried centuries of defiance. "Watch me." And then he shifted. The sound tore through the air, bone, sinew, spirit merging. His body became motion and fury, for black as the night that birthed the stars. His eyes blazed gold and silver, twin suns bound by one destiny. The legions roared in answer, their lines breaking into charge. She could have run. She almost did. But as the first spear left the soldier's hand, instinct took over. The flame surged through her veins, no longer chained, no longer afraid. The river boiled beside her, its surface splitting open in waves of light. When she raised her hand, the valley answered. The world ignited. Flame swept across the battlefield, not burning flesh, but stripping away deceit. Armor dissolved into dust. Weapons melted into nothing. What remained were wolves, unmasked, howling beneath the weight of their own truth. The alpha fought beside her, their movements perfect, as if choreographed by fate. His claws tore through chains, her flames sealed the wounds he could not reach. When the predator fell, his last breath carried a curse, a whisper meant to wound. "You think you've won," he hissed. "But every empire reborn in fire must one day turn to ash." She didn't answer. She only watched the life fade from his eyes. When it was over, silence reigned. The sky itself seemed to bow, clouds parting, revealing the pale light of dawn. The alpha turned to her, his fur still streaked with silver fire. Slowly, painfully, he shifted back, standing bare and bloodied before her. She walked toward him, her steps slow, deliberate. The flame had dimmed, leaving faint trails of light beneath her skin. He met her halfway, breath ragged. "You could have let them take you," he said softly. "I could have," she replied. "But then I'd be nothing but the curse they named me." He smiled, faint but real. "You were never a curse." Her hand brushed his jaw, trembling. "Then what am I?" He looked at her, truly looked, and whispered, "The beginning." Behind them, the ruins still smoked. The legions lay scattered, the forest reborn in silver light. But beneath that fragile peace, a darker current stirred, whispers from the temple's prophecy twisting in the wind. The child of flame would awaken the Alpha King. But the world would burn before their union was complete. And as the dawn rose over the battlefield, her heart knew, the war had only just begun. The valley held its breath. Moonlight poured like cold milk over the grass, painting everything in silver and blue. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke, the leftover scent of last night's fire and the iron taste of battle. In the shallow hollow, a dying blaze spat out one last orange sigh, and two figures sat just beyond its reach, wrapped in the quiet that comes after violence. She listened to the crackle of the embers like it was a confession. He watched the dark lines of the valley, his silhouette cut against the pale sky. Neither moved for a long time. Words had been used up on the field, now they felt clumsy, too blunt for what needed saying. So they let the silence say what language could not. His voice came first, low and rough from a place that had learned to do without softness. He spoke like a man who had rehearsed grief until even sorrow felt familiar. "I watched her die," he said. The sentence fell between them like a stone. There was no drama in it, no flourish, only the fact of it, cold and simple. "My mate." They dragged her to the arena because she refused to bow. The high matrons wanted a lesson. The city wanted a show. She turned her head toward him, her sightless face tilted to the moon. The words landed in her chest like winter's first sharp air. She could hear how he held each syllable, the restraint, the weight of memory. "You didn't stop them," she said, quiet as the ash at their feet. Not a question. A fact they both lived in. He closed his eyes, like shutting out a place too bright. "I tried," he whispered. "I tore through guards until my arms bled and my lungs burned. But there were too many. They had steel and law and the kind of cruelty that wears a robe and calls itself justice." He swallowed. "I watched her die and nothing in me was left the same." She felt the tremor in his breath. She could imagine the scene, the cages, the torches, the shame they shouldered so other men wouldn't have to. Her own story folded into his like two torn maps that somehow matched along the burned edges. Pain made them understand one another without needing to explain. "You kept living," she said after a while, because the silence was too wide otherwise. It sounded small, but it made room. "That means something." He laughed once, a soft, disbelieving sound. "Living is not the same as being whole." He ran a hand through hair still flecked with ash. The movement was human and not, practiced and familiar, like a ritual that had held him together through winters. "After she died, I put on armor thicker than steel. I built a face that did not hurt. I became a king of losses. I took lands, I settled anger into laws. But inside, everything was ash. I walked kingdoms like a ghost." She let that land inside her, slow. There was no sympathy that felt manufactured here, only recognition, the kind of mirror that shows you the parts you hide even from yourself. You wanted revenge, she said gently. You wanted to make them pay. I thought that would fix me, he admitted. But vengeance is only another chain. It will bind you to the past like any other collar. His voice held no sermon. It held a tired honesty. When I saw you at the auction, something broke me open in a way I didn't expect. You burned the hall. You walked away. And I thought, for the first time since she died, I saw a thing I didn't know how to name. A fire that didn't aim to destroy for the sake of ash. She turned the words over in her mouth. The echo of the market, the smell of smoke and iron, rose like a tide. You watched me burn everything down and still you wanted me? Her laugh was soft, incredulous. That should have been reason to hate me. Maybe, he said. But I saw you. Not the burning. Not the fear other people projected on you. You stood in the flames and didn't look away. He paused, and for the first time she heard something like a bruise under his words, longing. I wanted to know why. They sat with that. The night pulsed in small, quiet beats. Somewhere, a lone bird called and then fell silent, somewhere else, a fox moved like a thought through the brush. The world continued its slow, indifferent turning, and the two of them sat small in the sweep of it. She reached out, one hand hovering in the air at first, testing the space. Her fingers found his sleeve, then his hand. The touch was tentative, the way someone learns the map of a coastline by walking it at low tide. His fingers closed around hers like a promise, not loud but real. Her hand trembled in his. He did not flinch. He did not pull away. You could leave, she said, because she owed him that truth. You could walk away and it would be safer for you. You have a pack, a name, duty. The warning sat between them like a stone. She had given away everything once. The fear was a living thing in her chest. He turned his hand so her palm could press against his skin. And you could run, he answered. The words were soft but steady, like a tide that wouldn't be undone. You could hide in those mountains until the bones of the world decide you are quiet. But what do you gain? A quieter death? A life half-lived in fear? He studied her with a patience that felt almost sacramental. If you love me, you'll risk everything, he said. If you love me, you'll become the thing that sets the world on fire and I'll stand before it, not to stop it, but to burn with you. She felt the weight of that promise like a warmth under ice. If I love you, she breathed, I'll destroy you. It wasn't bravado. It was a confession she had learned to author with care. Her voice was a raw, naked thing, equal parts terror and truth. She had seen what she could do. She had watched the world recoil. She believed the flame inside her took whatever home it touched and rearranged it until only ash remained. He smiled, a small thing that made him look younger and more human than any throne. There was no judgment in it, only something steady and unafraid. Then destroy me, he said, and the challenge in his voice held no threat. It held welcome. But don't disappear on me before you do. Her breath hitched. The one thing she'd perfected was leaving. The thought of staying made something in her both ache and rebel. She wanted to flee, to keep being the thing that frightened kings and comforted ghosts. She wanted to be alone because alone meant unraveling in private, in a way the world couldn't witness or weaponize. He watched her like someone afraid to scare a fragile bird. You don't have to decide tonight, he added after a long beat, as if offering a lifeline rather than pressuring a choice. Trust comes like a map that's redrawn as you walk it. It won't be perfect. I won't be perfect. But I will not leave. That refusal was its own kind of tenderness. She felt something warm, dangerous, and honest unfurl in her like the first small green at the edge of winter's last hold. Her hand tightened around his for a moment and then relaxed. I never wanted to be anyone's weapon, she said finally. Everything they gave me was a label, cursed, monster, bargain. I learned to mourn my own life, to thank whatever gods for the small quiets I could steal. Her voice thinned on the last word. But every time I let the flame touch something, I lose it. I lose people. I lose places. I lose myself. You won't lose yourself with me, he said, and his answer was not a promise to protect her from what she is, but a vow to stand with her through the consequence of it. If that is what happens, then we share it. The moon bore witness, cold and impartial. He shifted closer, not with the clumsy heat of a lover clasping at comfort, but with the careful movement of someone learning how to hold another's brokenness without crushing it. She leaned into him the way someone leans into an oath, careful, testing, searching for purchase. Their shoulders touched. That small contact was a whole new geography. The space between them grew smaller until their breaths mixed. They almost crossed the last line. Words stumbled away and fingers brushed faces they both wanted and feared. For a suspended breath, the world held the possibility of something like peace. He lifted his hand, slow as thought, and cupped the curve of her cheek. She did not flinch, she did not pull away. The skin beneath his palm was warm and real. Their mouths were a breath apart. The air smelled like ash and rain and something sweet that the night could not name. He leaned in, not to claim, but to ask. For a heartbeat the universe narrowed to that small motion, the tilt of a head, the question in a touch, the invitation to collapse into another person's steadiness. Then the valley answered. Far off, a wolf lifted its head and let out a long, wavering howl that cut through the fragile hush. It was a sound that pulled at old chords, a summoning that wasn't only about territory but about duty, about bloodlines, and the names packed into a family tree. Lyria's body hitched like someone pulled by an invisible leash. Her eyes widened in a way he could feel across the line of skin between them. She drew back, the space suddenly a cliff. That was my mother, she breathed. The words were small and awful. The name sat heavy in the air, a poison and a chain both, the woman who had sold her, shaped her, and hunted her. She called. Fear flamed across her face, naked and immediate. If she's close, she'll take you. She'll make you choose. She'll use you as proof that her bargains were right. He did not flinch. He did not step away. If anything, he closed his hands on hers tighter, like defiance had a physical shape. Let her come, he said. There was a steadiness in him that sounded older than himself. Not bravado, a kind of acceptance that makes courage look like a quiet thing. If she wants to play that game, she will find I am not an easy trophy. She shook her head, the movement quick and frightened. You don't understand her reach. She has senators and soldiers and men who sell their honor for a coin. She will make you king in name and puppet in truth. The thought of him trapped in her mother's gilded cage made her skin prickle with a new kind of dread. If I love you, I'll destroy you. She repeated it like a warning and a plea both. She wasn't testing him, she was telling the future she feared. He pressed his forehead to hers then, a small, steadying bridge. Then destroy me, he whispered, voice soft as paper. But don't vanish while you do it. Stay. We'll learn what remains. His breath was warm against her lips, and she felt that warmth in a part of herself that had been trained to freeze. They sat like that for a long time, two ruined things stitched together with a thread that might break or might hold. The sky slid from moonlight into a slow, cobalt dusk. In the far distance, the sound of men moving could be heard, torches, orders, the rustle of armor. The world was gearing itself up again. Finally, she let herself say the one thing she had been keeping like a small treasure, or perhaps a warning. If I stay, she said, the word steady now, it won't be because I'm fearless. It'll be because I'm tired of running. And because your hand feels like the only shore I haven't wrecked against. He smiled then, and it was the kind of small, real thing that could bend iron. That is enough. They rose together, the night wrapping them in its cool hands. There was no grand pact spoken, no ring or vow. There was only the slow, mutual decision to walk toward danger together and see if the world would let them keep what they brought into it. As they moved away from the dying fire, the valley breathed out and the forest swallowed their tracks. The howl of a lone wolf followed them like a question and a benediction both. Above, the stars watched their small rebellion and did not look away. Dawn broke like a wound. The first light did not rise, it bled. The valley that once whispered their names now screamed with soldiers' feet. Silver spears glinted where dew should have lived. The scent of iron choked the morning. And through it all, she was dragged, bound, blindfolded, stripped of the peace she had barely begun to taste. Her wrists burned against the silver cuffs. Her throat was raw from silence. When the blindfold was torn away, the world she met wasn't the quiet forest she had fled to, but the one she had fled from. The Roman market of Lyrian. Ruins, rebuilt in cruelty's image. The same stones that once drank her tears now stood taller, glossier, painted with banners that bore her mother's crest, a silver flame devouring a wolf's heart. The air trembled with chanting, with the kind of hunger only crowds could summon. They wanted a spectacle. A punishment. A myth reaffirmed. She was shoved forward. Her knees hit the cold marble where she had once knelt as a child, when her mother first branded her. The same dais stood before her, the same pit beneath it where beasts had been loosed for blood sport. And there she was. Her mother. Regal. Untouched by time. Her eyes shimmered like liquid steel beneath a crown of woven flame. She looked upon her daughter not with recognition, but with the satisfaction of a queen whose prophecy had circled back to her. The blind Omega will fulfill her purpose, she declared, her voice cutting through the crowd like a blade dipped in honey. Her power will feed the flame of eternity. The gods demand it, and she raised her hand toward the sky, I will give them what they hunger for. The crowd erupted. Wolves and humans both bowed, some in reverence, others in fear. But through the chaos, another sound carved through the air, hoofbeats. A growl that was not mortal. The soldiers turned, parting as if the storm itself had entered their midst. The Alpha King. He rode into the square astride a beast of night, its eyes lit like dying stars. His cloak was torn, his armor bloodstained, his presence a threat wrapped in calm. When he dismounted, silence fell like a guillotine. Release her, he commanded. The words held no plea. They were law spoken into existence. Her mother laughed softly. You think yourself her savior, boy? You were always too sentimental for the throne. She turned to the council, lined like statues behind her. Tell him what the stars have written. A robed elder stepped forward, holding a scroll that shimmered with ash. His voice trembled as he read, though whether from fear or reverence none could tell. The prophecy says, the flame born blind shall consume the Alpha's heart. The king shall fall by her hand, and the moon shall weep blood. The words slithered across the crowd, and their whispers turned to panic. She will kill him, someone cried. She's cursed. The council fanned the fear like wind to fire. She will bring ruin. She is the omen reborn. She must be sacrificed to save the pack. And in that tide of noise, she looked up, straight toward him. The man who had promised not to leave. For a heartbeat, their worlds collided again, his gaze, fierce and desperate, trying to reach her through the storm. Do you believe them? She asked, voice breaking under the weight of everything they had not said. He didn't answer at first. His jaw flexed, his eyes darting between her and the council, his hands trembling at his sides. Duty pulled one way. Love the other. The pause was only a breath long, but it was enough. Her mother saw it. She smiled. See, my daughter, she whispered, descending the dais. Her voice was silk around a dagger. He hesitated. He doubts you. Just as they all did. The Omega's heart cracked open. The silence between them turned sharp. Her mother leaned closer, her perfume sweet and poisonous. He's one of them. He came to bring you back, not free you. The king always kneels when the crown calls. Her pulse thudded in her throat. She wanted to believe he would deny it, that he would shout, break, fight. But his face, his beautiful, tormented face, stayed still. And in stillness, doubt grows teeth. Tell me it's a lie, she said, her voice trembling like glass about to break. Tell me you didn't come for the throne. He opened his mouth, but the council's guards stepped forward. Take the traitor, one barked. He stands against the law. The crowd roared again, blind and hungry. Her mother raised her arms, basking in the chaos like a goddess born of ruin. Let the flame fulfill its destiny. The soldiers reached for the Omega's chains. Something inside her broke. The pain that had lived in her bones since birth, the fear, the hunger, the loneliness. All of it shattered into light. Silver fire licked her wrists, melting the metal. The air trembled. The marble beneath her feet cracked. She screamed, not in pain, but in release. The fire burst outward. It devoured the ropes, the banners, the stone. It climbed the sky like a living storm. The soldiers fell to their knees, their weapons dissolving into vapor. The ancient market that had enslaved her burned again, this time not in her shame, but in her rage. Her mother stumbled back, the crown slipping from her head. What have you done? She hissed. I've stopped being yours, the Omega whispered, voice shaking the heavens. The Alpha reached for her through the chaos, shouting her name, but the storm drowned him out. The flame consumed everything, throne, banners, prophecy. And when it finally broke, there was no body, no sound. Only light. And silence. When the light fell, the world was not the same. The mountains had split. Rivers boiled silver. Wolves across the realm fell to their knees, not in prayer, but in awe. The moon bled crimson, veiling the earth in a haunting glow. And from the ashes, she rose. Her skin glowed faintly, like embers refusing to die. Her eyes, once blind, now burned with molten silver. She looked upon the world for the first time, truly saw it. Every lie her mother had told, every scar she'd buried beneath silence, stood revealed. She was not cursed. She was chosen. In the distance, the Alpha King staggered from the ruins, armor scorched, eyes wide. His voice cracked when he saw her. Lyria. She turned toward him. The air rippled between them like heat over sand. You believed them, she said softly. You thought I'd destroy you. I hesitated, he admitted, his voice raw. And I was wrong. He stepped forward, blood dripping from his palm. You are the fire I've been running toward my entire life. Her eyes softened, but before she could answer, a voice split the sky. Her mother. Still alive, still defiant, standing atop the shattered altar that once crowned the market. You think this ends with you? She spat. You think the gods will let you rule their flame? The ground shook as ancient runes ignited beneath her feet. Shadows rose, flickering, twisted forms of wolves and men, the spirits of Roman gods who had once enslaved their kind. They coiled around the matron like armor, their whispers thick with hunger. You were born to serve, her mother hissed, her voice layered with 100 others. Your fire feeds them. The sky turned black. The wind screamed. The air thickened until even sound seemed to bleed. But Lyria, no longer blind, no longer afraid, stepped forward. Silver fire curled around her hands like the touch of something ancient and holy. No more chains, she said. No more sacrifices. Her mother's laughter curdled the air. You cannot kill gods, child. Then I will unmake them. The Alpha King moved beside her. His armor cracked and his voice trembled, but his gaze was steady. Together. They joined hands. Her silver flame leapt to his touch, his aura, dark, earthy, alive, flared in response. Light and shadow twisted, collided, and then fused. A roar rose, not from their throats, but from the earth itself. Wolves miles away held an answer. The stars flickered, bowing to the merging of forces that were never meant to coexist. The gods shrieked. Their forms splintered like glass under pressure. The matron screamed as her divine armor turned to ash, her own power devouring her from within. Lyria's eyes glowed brighter, the light reaching into every crevice of the fallen city. You sold me to them, she said, her voice like thunder breaking. You broke me so I would never rise. But I am the fire you tried to bury. The alpha's voice joined hers, a counterpoint of raw strength and grief. And I am the shadow that guards her flame. Together, they unleashed everything. The altar cracked. The sky burst open. A wave of silver and black light swept across the horizon, dissolving the last of the false gods into dust. When the silence returned, it was total. Only the two of them remained, kneeling amid a world reborn. The dawn was new, the air alive with the scent of rain and smoke. The ruins shimmered with quiet peace. The moon, pale and full again, watched over them like an old friend. He looked at her, trembling, half afraid she might vanish once more. What are you now? She turned her face toward him, silver eyes soft but endless. Not blind. Not cursed. Just free. He smiled, tired, human, in love. Then what happens now? She reached for his hand, their fingers threading through the ashen light. Now, she said, we see what the world becomes when it's no longer afraid of the fire. The wind rose, carrying her words through the valley, through the broken cities, through the hearts of every wolf who had ever bowed to fear. And in that breathless dawn, a legend was born. The blind Omega who saw through gods. The Alpha who chose to burn beside her. And the world that finally learned to kneel, not in fear, but in reverence. The wind carried the scent of ash and new beginnings. The fire had gone out, yet the earth still glowed where her feet had once touched. All around, silence. The kind that follows storms, the kind too heavy to be peace. The Alpha King stood in the ruins of what had once been empire and altar, his breath shallow, his pulse echoing the rhythm of something ending, and something being born. The air was still charged with her, Lyria. Her essence clung to the smoke, to the stones, to him. He could feel her flame in his bones, even though she was gone. Then came her voice. Not from the world of the living, not from memory, something between. Would you have chosen me, or feared me too? The question slid into his chest like a blade made of silk. He turned toward the horizon, where the first light broke over the mountains, but she was not there. Only the ghost of her silhouette, suspended in the crimson fog, shimmering as if her soul had been woven into the dawn. He wanted to answer. He wanted to tell her he had chosen her long before the gods ever named him king. But his throat locked, and his silence said everything she already knew. Her voice came again, softer now, almost a sigh. Is power a curse, or the only way to survive love? His heart twisted. He remembered the way her hand had felt in his before the final light consumed them, the warmth, the trust, the promise that even destruction could be sacred. He sank to one knee among the ruins, the scent of rain mingling with smoke, his head bowed. You were never my curse, he whispered to the emptiness. You were my beginning. Above him, the moon still burned faintly red. The last of her fire curled through the night like the tail of a dream refusing to die. He closed his eyes. In the stillness, her image lingered, hair like wildfire, eyes of molten silver, skin marked by destiny and defiance. She was gone, but her essence thrummed in every heartbeat, every breath of the world she had remade. Somewhere deep inside, he felt her answer, not in words, but in warmth. Love doesn't end. It transforms. The ashes shimmered. The ruins sighed. And then, as the wind swept through the remnants of the market, her final whisper reached him, clear, fearless, eternal. If my fire touched something inside you, don't let it fade. He lifted his gaze, watching the silver particles drift toward the stars. Her light scattered into constellations, finding places to rest in the dark. And in that moment, she became myth. A goddess reborn. A wolf untamed. The world would remember her not as the blind Omega, not as the prophecy's pawn, but as the flame that refused to die quietly. If her fire touched something inside you. The whisper returned, softer now, almost human again. Don't let it fade. It was not a plea. It was a promise. Subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections, the wind murmured through the broken pillars. Where love defies fate, and every heartbeat tells a story that burns. Then silence. The night deepened. The ruins cooled. The fire's ghost withdrew into the shadows of the pines. The Alpha King rose slowly, eyes hollow with loss yet sharpened with purpose. He knew this was not the end. No prophecy burned out clean. They always left an ember, waiting for the right wind to ignite again. And that wind was already stirring. The forest grew still, unnaturally so. Even the cicadas held their breath. A low growl rippled through the darkness. It was not an animal's hunger, it was recognition. The kind of sound made by something ancient remembering its name. From the tree line, a figure emerged. Cloaked in black, moving like a shadow unbound by gravity. In their hand, a sigil of flame flickered, the same symbol that had burned above the altar when Lyria's mother called the gods. But this was no priest, no council envoy. This one carried purpose, not prayer. The stranger knelt, pressed the sigil into the earth, and whispered something in the old tongue. The ground responded, runes glowing faintly beneath the soil, pulsing in rhythm with a hidden heart. She is not the only one, the voice said, low, rough, female. And the forest seemed to lean closer, listening. The figures had shifted, revealing eyes that glowed faint gold, not silver. Not Alpha, not Omega. Something between. Something new. She woke the flame, the stranger murmured. But she forgot, fire spreads. A gust of wind blew through the trees. Lightning struck in the distance, splitting the sky into veins of light. The earth trembled. The scent of iron returned. In the far distance, a wolf howled, deep, furious, and alive. Another answered. Then another. A chorus rising beneath the storm. The woman in black stood. The sigil blazed brighter, its shape warping into a crest, the mark of the ancient bloodline long thought extinct. The Alpha bloodline. And in her other hand, a shard of obsidian pulsed faintly with silver veins, the remnant of the altar, humming with the energy of the goddess who had shattered it. The stranger's lips curved into something between grief and vengeance. Let them believe she ended it, she said. That's what stories are for. The wind whipped her cloak as she turned, vanishing into the trees. Behind her, the sigil in the dirt erupted in a single, silent burst of flame that left one final message scorched into the ground. The prophecy continues. Far above the storm, the moon pulsed once more, its light fractured, uncertain. Deep beneath the earth, something old stirred. Bloodline magic, buried, forbidden, restless. The kind of power that waits generations to rise again. The kind that remembers. The kind that chooses its moment. And somewhere, far from the ashes, far from the ruin, a heartbeat echoed in time with the thunder. A heartbeat that didn't belong to the dead or the mourning, but to the living. To what comes after. Because legends don't end, they evolve. The war was not over. It had only changed form. The Alpha Bloodline War was only beginning. The forest returned to silence, but the silence felt different now. Thicker. Expectant. The moonlight spilled over the broken stones where the goddess had once stood, catching on something glinting in the ash, a single silver feather, glowing faintly as if it still remembered her touch. A symbol of her flame, left behind. A warning. A promise. And from somewhere unseen, her voice drifted again, distant, half laughter, half sorrow. Did you think the gods would let us go so easily? Thunder rolled across the sky. The earth quaked in answer. Then darkness swallowed everything. The story didn't end. It only paused, waiting for whoever was brave enough to lift the next page. Because somewhere, between the ashes and the stars, Lyria's fire still burned. And the world, whether it feared her or not, was about to burn with her.